Line editing is the part of the writing process that makes your story fun to read. So you have the basics down, you've got a story, it's cute, you've revised that the bigger ducks are in a row, but we've got some littler ducks that also need to be put into a row with line editing. So I have 7 simple specific line edits that anyone can incorporate into their revision process. But first, what's line editing and how's it different than the other forms of editing? So there are 5 main types of book editing. There's developmental, line, copy, proofreading, and specialized. Developmental edits look at your entire project as a whole. It checks the entire plot, the themes, the pacing, the character arcs, all of those big ginormous things. This is typically the first step in a traditional editing process. Line edits look at the writing itself. Are the sentences clear? Are they concise? Are they varied? Do they flow in a logical order? Do the word choice and verbiage contribute to the scene's tone overall? So developmental edits work on the story and line edits work on the prose itself. Copy editing is for grammar, punctuation, spelling, syntax, and style consistency. This is different from line editing in that it's more about technical correctness, where line editing is about creative stylistic edits. Proofreading and copy editing are essentially the same thing, except proofreading is quite meticulous and it happens at the end. So it checks for typos and maybe any mistakes that happen during the formatting process. This is the final read through before it goes to print. Specialized edits are going to depend on your project. So it might be things like fact checking, sensitivity reading, historical experts, any kind of like consultation you need to do for that particular book. This step, the sun is crazy right now. That was too much, sun, I'll be honest. Yeah, so the specialized edit will either happen before or after the developmental edit, if it happens at all. So the line edit is to make the writing pretty, make it flow well, and make it understandable. It's also the most fun, in my opinion. That's why I do live examples and videos, which we are also doing today. Stick around. So let's get into the 7 line edits we're looking at today. It does help to read the text out loud as you edit. It's a good way to spot areas for improvement because we have a nuance and particular cadence that we use in real life that our ears are accustomed to hearing, but our eyes aren't necessarily good at catching. Okay, an easy grab is redundancy. This is repetitive sentences, using a word too close to another instance of the same word, or that classic sentence structure that every newbie writer will cling to, where you make a statement, add a comma, and then rephrase that statement worse. An exception to this is that repetition can often be intentional and stylistic. If it's intentional, wonderful. Another note is that while repetition of a word can be noticeable and distracting, it does depend on what word you're repeating. So it's not as noticeable if you're repeating articles or prepositions, maybe pronouns. Look out more for like nouns, adjectives, verbs, those more visible words. Here's something so random and specific. Search your document for of. For some reason, people really don't see the word of. This makes it really easy to repeat without realizing. I've worked on a few editing teams and every single person will miss the double of. We have like almost heuristics that happen between our eyes and brain where we take shortcuts when we're reading. We'll take out words that don't belong. We'll add words subconsciously. We will correct things without realizing we're doing it. This can make line editing really difficult, and one of those common mistakes is the double of. If you don't want to search your document for that, just send it to print and then read it one time. And you'll just, flashing neon, you'll see it. We should also look for repetition outside of just the wording. This could be a repeated generic action that your character's taking, like a sigh or a shrug. And you'll like have those character quirks that you'll repeat on purpose, but if it's just there to take up space, I mean, number one, write something cooler, but if you don't want to rewrite it, just avoid using that action multiple times in one scene. Swap the shrug for a sigh. Okay, a summary of things to look for: repetitive sentence structure and length, repetitive words, statement, comma, remix of the same statement, the double of, and accidental repeated body language, and those other small events. Another thing that we're looking for in a line edit is the flow. So how do the sentences fall into each other? Where do the paragraphs break? You're basically improving the readability here. Can you read it out loud and it sounds like an audiobook, or does it sound kind of awkward and clunky and strangely paced? A common edit I'll make here is adding a beat. You can more easily spot those opportunities when you're reading it out loud. So sometimes you just need a little pause between lines, either to let the previous line sit for a second, like if you've said something very impactful that you want to sit with the reader, you'd put a pause. Sometimes it's adding a little suspense or dramatic tension. And this can be a super simple edit, like maybe you're moving a dialogue tag from the beginning or middle of a quote to the end of it to kind of add a pause before the next line. It can also be entering down into a new paragraph. So just adding a line break, you're literally not adding new words or moving anything else around. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to try to find a place where that applies in our example story in a minute. Word choice is also something that you're going to want to look for. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're using the correct words, unless you're intentionally using the incorrect words for art. But even if your definitions line up, it might not be the right word for the tone of that scene. You want to choose words and phrases that will support whatever emotion you're trying to stir up in your reader in that scene. Some words are just awful to use in certain contexts. Once I wrote a sex scene, I can't tell you how it happened, but the word silly ended up in there. Can't have that. A simple thing to look for in word choice is accidental rhyming or alliteration. Like, listen for the sounds. Alliteration is when the first letter or sound of a word is repeated several times. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. It's very uncool to incorporate things like rhyming and alliteration on purpose in some forms of writing, but those little accidents can just sound strange. It brings a sort of sing-song tone to maybe a scene that you want people to take very seriously and you don't want them to giggle at. And if you accidentally rhyme and alliterate, I will giggle. Okay, number 4 is cliches and metaphors. These are two very fun things to write with. You can be very creative, but it's also very easy to be cringe. So problems to look for here include mixing metaphors, which is where you accidentally match up two different metaphors. We'll burn that bridge when we come to it. That one's actually pretty fun. What you want to look out for with mixed metaphors is using the wrong observational word. This is where I see it most often. Like, someone will use a metaphor about hearing something, but then they use the word see instead of hear. And sometimes we just mismake metaphors where we're further muddling the point instead of clarifying it. Don't try to force a metaphor. It should make the concept you're talking about more understandable or help your reader to visualize something more accurately, not just to be wordy for word's sake. And typical writing advice is to avoid cliches, but I don't think you should. While using them straight up can make your writing feel kind of amateur and stale, they can be perfectly fine to use if you put your own little twist on it. Like, you could tweak the phrasing so it means the opposite thing. You could replace a couple of words to change the meaning. You could use it in a very unexpected context or like as a double entendre. I recommend looking at cliche lists if you're unfamiliar with them, particularly for my non-native language writers. Those can be helpful reference material while you're doing your edits. So if you write something and it just sounds like familiar or very in the vernacular, or maybe it used to be, keep an eye on it. It's probably a cliche and it might suck. So make it not suck. One big thing a line editor does is check for consistency in tone and voice. So the character voice is important, obviously. You want their dialogue and like internal thoughts to match. And whatever narrator you've chosen, whether it's an omniscient narrator or a character, you should have developed a unique voice for that. So you want to check for consistency throughout the piece. Also for tone, you should be aware of your book's subgenre and tropes that you're trying to use and your target reader. Dialogue is much of your book, probably. So you want to look at that closely as well. You want your dialogue to sound natural. Again, read it out loud. Does it sound like something a real human would say of their own volition? Do you need to add some contractions? Do you need to remove some filler words? If you've been a viewer of this channel since the dawn of time, you might remember a video I did a million years ago on dialogue. I'll just refer to her.
Let's say this is an exact transcript of a real-life conversation. This also isn't good dialogue, but inside of it is the good dialogue. All you have to do is trim away the unnecessary and boring and distracting, the uhs, the stutters, so we take nothing from the contrived fantasy conversations no real person would ever have. We just cut out the boring bits of real conversation until we're left with interesting, relevant, realistic dialogue.
I think the barnyard animals also made an appearance.
Hi!
One tip that I would love to give you about writing dialogue is to avoid spelling out unique dialects. I love Brian Jakes as much as the next autistic homeschooler, but what is forcing your readers to phonetically scrutinize the text adding to the experience? You can convey things like dialects and accents and speech impediments a lot just through sentence structure and the words that you include or exclude. You can also use things like slang and regional terminology spelled in a reasonable way. I'm not saying you can never phonetically spell stuff out, but I suggest you use it very sparingly if you do, like for a minor character or for a particular phrase. I'll see writers try to represent a character with a lisp, and every single S will be a TH. You can do it for the first couple sentences and maybe like tossed in a he lisped as a dialogue tag to remind the reader that he's lisping, but oh my god, chill. And of course, this weird kind of dialogue strategy of spelling things out phonetically is historically used in dialogue for characters who are disabled, non-native English speakers, part of a marginalized ethnicity. Chill out, you're being weird. If you want an incredible example of this problem, read The Gold Bug by Edgar Allan Poe. You just wouldn't expect to see that kind of behavior from a dude that married his 13-year-old first cousin. But anyway, let's get a bad example of dialect from Miss ChatGPT and see if we can fix it. Oh my god, I ain't got nothing to say about that there old house. It just ain't none of your business. I hate that. Sounds like she's trying to represent someone from Farmerville, so let's rewrite it. Okay, so we can say, I don't got shit to say about that old house. It ain't none of your business, actually. So we're conveying the same accent, but through vernacular double negatives and regional grammar rather than being insane. All right, number 7, passive voice. Passive voice does have its place. It's just never where y'all put it. So let's briefly go over the difference between active and passive voice for the uninitiated. In active voice, the subject of the sentence performs the action described by its verb. So active voice makes your sentence clearer, it makes actions more direct, and it usually reads in a more engaging way. So it's what you want to default to in creative writing. Whereas passive voice is when the object of the action is placed at the beginning of the sentence and the subject either comes after or it's completely left out. So passive voice is usually wordier. It's a little more difficult to read because it's happening backwards and it removes the character's agency, but it can still be used strategically. So in creative writing, if the object of the action is more important rather than the subject, passive voice can put the emphasis where you want it. Use this sparingly. It's so irritating to read. You'll see passive voice more often in academic formal writing because it creates objectivity by downplaying the subject and focusing on the results. So it's a scientific writing thing. It's also a journalism with an agenda thing. Pay attention to how controversial article titles are phrased. Instead of saying, Group A dropped a bomb on civilians of Group B, they'll say, Group B was bombed. We don't know how. Okay, our 7 line edit checklist items are checking for redundancy in the word usage, sentence structure, phrasing, or character actions. We're making sure the sentences and paragraphs flow naturally, readably, that we're putting emphasis where we want it, and that we give enough space that the moment requires. We're staying on top of word choice, make sure the vocabulary is suitable for that scene's mood and that character or narrator's voice. If you're gonna use a cliche, give it a twist. If you're gonna use a metaphor, make sure it clarifies your meaning instead of being a weird distraction. Keep the tone and voice consistent. Edit your dialogue for flow and a natural cadence, and watch out for passive voice, but don't be afraid of it when it's necessary, like when you want to encourage misinformation. Anyway, let's get for real and see these principles in play. My pal Sage sent over one of their old short stories for me to use as an example. Thank you, Sage. I will link their website in the description. This story is called Skin and Bones. I'm actually going to go eat lunch first. I'll be back. Am I in focus? Would y'all tell me? Skin and Bones by Cutie Pie Sage. My skin was all wrong. It used to be so smooth, but it felt taut like leather stretched across a canvas. Right out the gate with the metaphor. Leather and canvas are both materials. I don't know how often people are stretching leather over anything, like the average person, so I don't know that this is enhancing the image for me. We could say, like, canvas stretched across a frame, but I feel like that's not icky enough. I think we need something visceral. This is an icky story. Did I give you that warning? I can't remember all of the ways that it's icky because it's been a few months, but it is a little icky. Okay, the crinkles around my eyes were too deep for my age, hair as dull as the blue of my eyes. There we've got some probably unintentional repetition. Getting eyes twice just kind of makes you feel weird. I did my best to mimic her makeup, posed as she did when I first saw her. I wondered if she saw what I did when she looked at herself. We've got some more repetition there with saw. This one feels more intentional. Posed as she did when I first saw her, I wondered if she saw what I did when she looked at herself. We're purposely referring back to that word, so that's an example of repetition that is okay. I smiled, my bottom lip split, the girl in the mirror stared back, eyes too wide, hair not falling quite right, my jawline wasn't as sharp as hers. I sighed, digging my fingers into where the lip split and peeling the skin back until it lay in one crumpled heap at my feet. So pretty, but not on me. It felt wrong to let such a nice body rot in the dumpster. A week later, I thought the girl in the coffee shop would suit me. Okay, this is an example of an edit I'd probably make for flow. So ending on, it felt wrong to let such a nice body rot in the dumpster, to me is suggesting that we're going to see something else happen with the body. Like they're going to bring it home and eat it or something. And that's not happening. So if we swap these two sentences, felt wrong to let such a nice body rot in a dumpster, so pretty but not on me. That gives us a clearer idea of what's happening. I also think it's unclear if they're just taking the skin, because it says body, but they're peeling the skin off. So it might be some kind of immaterial entity that's taking over people's entire body, but that's not what the description is saying to me. I don't know, body feels wrong there. But a week later, I thought the girl in the coffee shop would suit me. Okay, let's talk about a week later. Marking the passage of time by saying that time passed is a little bit floppy. So we could indicate this another way, like describing the weather or the time of day. So like if this happened in the daytime, we could say one rainy evening, something better than that, but you get it. I also kind of feel like the tracking of time like this doesn't suit the character. They're kind of feral, as you'll see in a little bit, and like detached from society, so I don't know that they would know that a week specifically had passed, but that's a little thing. She had strawberry blonde hair and soft green eyes that I thought would compliment me perfectly. Her mannerisms were quick, stilted, flitting her wrists as she talked and quirking the edges of her mouth. Even as she had serious conversations, I thought her skin would fit me very well. Okay, this description, hair and eyes. That's what we got up here as well, hair and eyes. Let me pull up something to read to you real quick. John Matthew Fox, in his book The Linchpin Writer, calls hair and eyes the devil horns of description. It's a default for everyone. That isn't to say that it's bad to describe hair and eyes, but you likely shouldn't lead with it unless you have a reason to. In most cases, when you meet people, you probably don't notice their eyes unless they're particularly noticeable. Then John uses the example of Dune when Zendaya is introduced. Her eyes were from in blue, staring out of a soft, round face, because in that story, an element in the place that she lives makes your eyes bright blue. So that's significant for the story and definitely something Timothée Chalamet would notice. And here's an example of excellent character description from A Drink Before the War by Dennis Lehane. Sterling Mulkern was a florid, beefy man, the kind who carried weight like a weapon, not a liability. He had a shock of stiff white hair you could land a DC-10 on and a handshake that stopped just short of inducing paralysis. So we get that he's stocky, scary, we know what his hair looks like, and we also get a feeling of his age, like probably 50s. We also get the vibe that he's maybe former military, or the person describing them as, just from the terminology. But mostly, they're telling us about his personality and how he carries himself, so it's matching obvious physical descriptions with what it might mean for the character. In The Linchpin Writer, John suggests an exercise to avoid the double horns where you brain dump for 5 minutes, like every description you can think of for your character, and then when you're done, you write a new character description, not using any of the stuff that you wrote in that previous exercise. So the idea is to overwrite and get like the easy grab stuff out of the way. Then you have to really dig for the good description. Okay, tangent over back to the story. But it was all wrong. My blonde hair made me look sickly, metallic against my bleached skin. I think my maybe confuses this. We still don't know what the character themselves looks like, so I think that this might be better as she or the. Had she always been so pale? I copied the way she talked in the mirror, but my wrists popped out of place as I moved, mouth twitching wildly when I spoke. I shed her skin in an alleyway for the rats to eat. I would probably make this and left it for the rats. So this is just a little less direct with it. In my opinion, stating things in a way that suggests what it means rather than just outright saying it can be a more engaging read. Like, leaving it for the rats, your brain has to fill in the blank of what the rats are going to do with it, which is eat it. So it makes the reader just a little bit more active in the story, like they're engaging with it. It's not a riddle, but it's just letting them use their imagination a teensy bit. Some bodies aren't meant for us. Statements like some bodies aren't meant for us and this story with someone trying on other people like clothes is what I call a footnote. It feels like the author is tapping their finger on the page and being like, do you get it? And that kind of blatantness has a place in like certain styles and genres, but toward me, I would cut it. As much as I tried to fix my hair like the others had, stand the way they did, my limbs felt like a puppet held up by their strings, movement with no conviction. If it was hard for me to look at, it must be sickening for others. Love that. Movement with no conviction is a perfect way to describe a marionette. If it was hard for me to look at, it must be sickening for others. That also hits a good emotional note, I think. I like this paragraph. Some days I ached for the right body so much that something pulsed beneath my skin, reaching for the arms I wished I had so I could end this incessant searching. I imagined the perfect body sprouting from within me like a flower blooming in spring, unfurling into what I've always dreamed of. Reaching for the arms I wished I had. What does this guy look like? We still don't know, which is interesting. I wonder if that's the point. Are we supposed to have no idea what we're looking at? Oops. I somehow missed copying a whole bunch of this story. Hold on. There we go. Maybe I was looking in the wrong places. People of the general public could be handsome, pretty sure, but what about those that we worship for their beauty? Yes, a perfect body would suit me perfectly. This might be a little goofy to me. I can't decide. If we want the character to be kind of, not necessarily vapid, but like a childishness in them, this works great. So this could be a good line. I skittered in the dark through high windows that looked over the city between silk sheets as I slept peacefully. I studied many faces in the moonlight. I considered one with a cleft chin, another a gap in their teeth. Some looked so pretty I couldn't bear the thought of stretching their skin over me. I could never fill it like they did. I like city between silk sheets as they slept peacefully. This is a good example of repeating sounds effectively in prose. So we've got the S repeat, and I've always considered SH and sheets, that's an S. The sound appears in different parts of the word. It's using different letters. We've got a C there, peacefully in the middle. It sounds cooler. It like gives the sentence a kind of flow, and you don't even really notice it. If the reader notices that you're doing this, in standard prose, you're probably doing way too much, but I like that. That's good. One night, I found it. She was perfect. I saw her crossing the street. She wore a dress that must have been tailored specifically for her, a deep blue satin that rested just above her knees, a collar cinched at her neck. Her skin was like polished oak wood with darker eyes that flashed hungrily as she looked both ways. Her lips were bright red, parted just enough to glimpse her whitened teeth. And her hair. I like the flashed hungrily because I feel like that's a projection from the character. They're seeing this girl's eyes as hungry because of their own desperation kind of beat. It was pulled up into a ponytail, soft caramels highlighting chocolate brown. She'd pulled 2 strips out to frame her face, curled at her cheekbones. The years it must have taken to grow such perfect hair. Or maybe she'd stolen it too. This I like for the same reason I like flashed hungrily. Like they're just, it almost makes the character feel selfish or self-centered because it's just like putting themselves into everyone else is also thinking and feeling the things that I'm thinking and feeling, which I think is a good character moment for this person thing. After I'd carefully slit her down the back and slid the skin from her frame, this makes it sound very easy to skin a person. I think it could be fun to have them like fumbling a part of it. Like it's difficult and they get frustrated and maybe they tear it. I don't think we necessarily need to see them doing the same thing where they find a person they think is cute, they try to put their skin on, and then it doesn't feel right and they take it off. So that's maybe an opportunity to mix things up a little bit, like they ruin it themselves by being overeager or something. I held it in front of a mirror about my height. I slipped her scalp over my head, popped her eyes back into place. I stepped into her legs, gliding my hands onto hers, and stood up straight. What is this creature? Why did the eyes stay attached to the skin? Am I not suspending my disbelief enough? I tend to do that. This was it, the perfect body. I flexed my fingers, savoring the stretch of her soft skin. We've got some more good sounds here in the Fs, and I also think a V is an F. Flexed my fingers, savoring the stretch of her soft skin. I dig it. I'm not sure if this is intentional, but I think it works for the story and like the strange serial killing creature. Like they're weird. It's giving weird. Her hair stayed intact throughout the process, and as I looked in the mirror, I felt pretty. Intact and process, I don't like that word choice. It feels kind of clinical. I don't feel like it matches the rest of it. I giggled in the dim light of her apartment, rifling through her closet for different colored clothes to complement my new skin. I looked perfect in every skirt I tried, every blouse. I stared at myself until the sunrise spilled through her thin curtains. After I stitched her skin over me and was sure it wouldn't slip off, I noticed a glint at the top of my finger. I held it to the light. It was white at the edge. Blood trickled from the rip I didn't know I'd made. White bone poking from skin. I gently pushed it back in and pressed the skin back together. It slid back out. I stitched it, stapled it, burned it so that it would melt into place, but no matter what, the bone ripped free like it knew it didn't belong. Is that her bone? Or is it the narrator's bone? Does it matter? I don't know. I stitched it, stapled it, burned it. In particular, makes me want to know more setting. Like, where are we? Why do they have a stapler? Sage, why do they have a stapler? My chest heaved, my vision blurred. This body couldn't hold me, and if this perfect body couldn't hold me, what could? That is very sad. There is a sad resonance to that line. I ripped it off in long strips, tore her from her eyes to her chin, split her chest open until it stretched past her shoulders and I could breathe again. Her ponytail went askew, so I ripped each hair from her scalp and wrenched it off my head. It was all wrong. When I was free of her form, I stared at myself in the mirror. No body would stretch perfectly over mine. No body would be perfect for me. This feels somewhat heavy-handed to me. I also feel like there should be more desperation because this is like the climax is how much story's left. And they don't seem worked up, the character. Their thought process is like strange and unsettling, but it feels too calm. What do y'all think? Something pulsed beneath my skin. I think this beat could be more dramatized. This is that breaking point right before the reveal and the conclusion, so I think we could really have them losing their stuff. If we had some more setting, it could be something connected to that, like they've had a pet cat the whole time and they rip it in half or something. I raked my fingers over my arm until I broke skin. Again, I don't know what their arm looks like. Clawing for what moved within me. Yuck! I gripped whatever I could and ripped it out. It exploded from my shoulder, blood splattering the mirror. We've got a lot of it's. Not too much describing what it is. Another arm, nothing like my own. What is your arm like? It was ethereal, exactly what I'd always pictured. With my new free hand, I peeled back the layers of myself. As I discovered more, my body, my perfect body, convulsed within me. It wasn't a slight pulse like before. It was hungry, like a starved dog lurching toward rotten meat. Yummy! I like starved dog. I like rotten meat. Okay. I keeled over, limbs sprouting from my exoskeleton, hair shooting from my scalp like weeds pulled from the dirt. Does this mean that the hair is falling out? Or is it growing? I feel like I would take out from the dirt, maybe, but then I would think that the metaphor is a little tired and maybe it could be grosser. The convulsing stopped. I think we had convulsed somewhere earlier, so I would want a different word here. I stood up. I wiped the blood from the mirror and saw myself for the first time. It might be intentional, but I'd love the story to be more grounded in its setting, even if that setting ends up being somehow surreal, because I'm picturing an alleyway with a full-length mirror in it. Is that where they are? I shuddered as wings unfurled from my back, and I shot from the apartment window. They're in an apartment. My point stands. Sunlight sparkling across my skin. This could be a good last line if the creature never went outside except at night. Maybe because they didn't want to be seen, like they were ashamed of their own skin, or because they don't have skin. I don't know what it looks like. I'm not sure what they're peeling back to find the exoskeleton. I like it, but I'm confused. But yeah, if their whole thing was like, I want to look human so I can go out into the light, them taking off into the sunlight now would be like a great little bow to finish off the story. I feel like I ended a story with something like that at some point. Was it in Starlight? Hang on. Yeah, it's the story that I named the collection after. Oh my god. I remember things that I do. It bleeds, but I don't feel it and I don't slow down. Golden rays warm my face and set the woods glowing. The sun is full risen. Yeah, so this was an abused girl who only, found reprieve in the nighttime. She'd leave the house. And in the day, she couldn't, basically. So I don't think there's any scene where she's outside in the sunlight, but at the end, she, spoilers, slams her dad with a cast iron skillet and takes off running as the sun rises. Okay, focus. I get that the character wanted a body that felt right the whole time, and now they have a body that they love. They just needed to be a little freak instead of trying to be human. They were seeking something they couldn't find, and they did find an unexpected solution to that problem, but I still think something tangible clicking into place here, like they couldn't go into the sun and they finally can, would be a nice little wrap up. The groundwork is there, but doing something like repeating a phrase from earlier or referencing back to something is great to do in a short piece, because then it makes the reader feel like, oh my god, you made a point. And maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Another thing, we're no longer line editing, I just have some thoughts. I think we need a way to sympathize with this character. Maybe we can somehow get a little closer to them so we can feel their pain and frustration more. Because as of now, we see this selfish creature murdering willy-nilly and feeding corpses to rats, then they learn nothing and get to fly away and be happy. And stories don't have to end in a way that the character deserves by whatever metric. But as a trans allegory, I think we could use a little more finesse. You know, what if we have them break the mirror earlier? They throw a little fit, and then that could be a nod to how they're like turning away from the reflection and giving up on trying to be human. And then like a part of the mirror could be what opens up their finger to reveal what's underneath. So like the act of letting go of this imagined self, they're able to find their true self. Vibe check? How do we feel about that? I'd also drag that beat out for a little bit before they snap so we can more clearly see the mindset shift before the twist reveal of they're an alien. Okay, Sage, thank you so much for letting me critique your story on the internet. I am so impressed by people who send me stuff for these videos. You're way stronger than I am. But I really enjoyed this story, and I think a couple of tweaks could make it... All right, that's how you line edit fiction. Hope this helps.